Welcome. The creative revolution starts now. In the last episode, I introduced the idea of lucid waking, which is very important to the inspiring practice. Based on the feedback I've received, some of you would like me to go a little more deeply into this idea. So let's do that before we move on to the next topic. First, let's look at lucid dreaming. This phenomenon occurs when you become aware that you're dreaming while you are in the dream. In lucid dreaming, you know that the dream is a subjective reality of your own making. Every event, setting, plot twist, and character in the dream is your creation. And when you become lucid in the dream, you might discover that you can reshape the events in the dream. For example, you may choose to fly or to take on a different form, like a bird or a wild animal. All of these things become possible in a lucid dream because you are not confined to the same limitations that may restrict your waking reality. In the last episode, I described this as having a foot in two different realities at once. In other words, you are a character in the dream, which, by the way, your character is your creation. At the same time, you are aware of existing in a reality that extends beyond the limits of the dream. That is the reality of waking life. I used the term dreamweaver, which was conceived by John Lennon in the song God, one of my favorite Lennon songs. The idea is that you weave together all the different strands that make up the dream. All of those elements are your creation and are under your control when you become lucid in the dream. Lucid waking, by analogy, is when you become aware that your waking reality is just as subjective and just as much your creation as the reality of the dream. It may not seem that way, but it is. Now you may say, wait a second, waking reality is different from a dream because you and I can agree on certain objective elements. For example, you may see a painting of two eyes behind me right now. Is that because that painting is an objective reality? Or could it be that the reason we see something that's more or less the same, and I can never know if your view of that painting behind me is the same as my own, because we may differ on what we're seeing, on what we experience, including the colors and the shapes, etc. Lennon had an answer for this. He said, a dream we dream alone is just a dream, but a dream we dream together, that's reality. Some of the things that seem so concrete in our waking life turn out not to be. The dimensions of space and time are perfect examples of this. We think that time is an objective reality, but it's not. For example, at certain points in your life, let's say you're in a doctor's waiting room, time may move very slowly. And at other times, it may move so fast that you hardly notice its passing. Physicists have asked, why is it that we move forward in time, but it's much more difficult to move backwards? And in recent years, some physicists have arrived at the conclusion that time is not a physical phenomenon, it's a psychological construct. The same may be true about space. Try this exercise for just a moment to prove my point. Bring your two hands together and experience the sensation of one hand touching the other. Now, I have some pretty startling news for you, which is that although you may sense that your two hands are touching, they can never touch. According to the laws of physics, the electrons on the surface of one hand repel the electrons on the surface of the other. And it would take more energy than is ever going to be available to you to bring even two electrons together so that they touch, let alone the millions or billions of electrons that are on the surface of your two hands. That means you have never touched anything in your life. So our ideas about space in three-dimensional reality are to some degree our own construction. This is a discovery that's very consistent with the constructivist movement in psychology, which says that our waking reality is a mental construction. We know that an infant does not have the ability yet to partition the world into individual objects and entities. One of the fundamental ideas in psychology is that infants feel this connectedness to their mothers. Mommy and I are one. That may be one of the most fundamental truths in a baby's life. Mommy and I are one. There is no separation between mother and child yet, because the conceptual framework that would allow those distinctions to be made hasn't formed yet. The reason that you and I can agree on so many elements of waking reality may simply be convention. What does the word convention mean? It means coming together. A convention is something that you and I agree upon is reality. For example, there are social conventions that determine how you and I would interact with one another when we meet. Conventions sometimes are passed down from one generation to the next, and we are hardly aware that we are embracing assumptions about reality that have been passed down to us from our parents, teachers, siblings, friends, peers, etc. To experience lucid waking, where you recognize that this waking reality is a subjective realm of your creation, means that you must be able to flow beyond the limitations of these conventions. You must be able to experience a deeper reality that extends beyond the surface appearances of waking life. What is that deeper reality which goes beyond the conventional realm? This question brings us back to the fundamental cosmology that is at the heart of the inspiring practice. In the beginning, which is now, because there is no beginning and there is no end, there is only now. The eternal now, the infinite here, is where we live. And in this moment, there is nature, which is undivided wholeness in flowing movement. The relationship between the undivided wholeness of nature and the universe of form is twofold. There is the explicate order. The word explicate means unfolded. This is the condition in which different forms arise from wholeness and exist in a way that appears to be independent and distinct. Every entity, object, person, animal, plant, thought, idea, image, each one is its own unfolded form that arises from the undivided wholeness of nature. Then there is the implicate order. Implicate means enfolded. The undivided wholeness of nature is enfolded into everything and everyone at every layer. It always has and it always will. Because there is an implicate order, the entire universe is pan-holistic. In other words, the whole abides in everything. That means wholeness lives in you and in me as in all things. Do you know what it feels like to have undivided wholeness abiding in you? I believe that most people have experienced wholeness at different points in their lives, perhaps when they have been in love, or during moments of creative inspiration, or any number of ways. If undivided wholeness does in fact abide in you, that is the deeper reality that extends beyond the waking realm. When you experience lucid waking, you become aware that this waking reality is a subjective reality of your own making, and that there is a deeper reality that extends far beyond the waking realm. And that reality is the undivided wholeness that lives in you. According to physicists like David Bohm, the universe of form unfolds from undivided wholeness. I have already expressed to you how that happens. It is a fountain of essence that flows out from the center of wholeness out into every part of the universe. But at the same time, that essence flows back into wholeness. Everything that gets created through this fountain of essence, through the unfolding of form from the formlessness of nature, all returns to wholeness. This is happening continually throughout eternity. The universe of form unfolds from formlessness and returns to the formless whole at every moment. You may not be aware that that's happening, but it is. This means that the creative genius of the universe, which is the undivided wholeness from which everything arises, is living in you and is creating an entire universe within you and through you here and now. In lucid waking, you get it. You recognize that this is the reality in which we're living. It's a dual reality. On the one hand, there is the explicate order in which everything seems to be individual, partitioned, separate, and distinct. And on the other hand, there is the implicate order in which undivided wholeness connects you to everything else in the universe, because that same wholeness that lives in you lives in everyone and everything beyond you. In our inspiring practice, we are going to learn how to embody nature fully, so that not only does that undivided wholeness abide in us, but we know that it does, and we command the creative power that lies within that wholeness. So thanks for listening and for your patience as we add a little more depth to our understanding of lucid waking, and stay tuned for more.